let's bring in CTV News political commentator, former leader of the New Democrats, Tom Mulcair, joining us from Quebec. Hey, Tom.
Good to be with you, Todd.
You can tell they've kind of workshopped that, eh? Fairness for all Canadians. Is it working?
Yeah. Not really. I mean, those polling numbers confirm it. And it's not just Léger, by the way. We saw the same sort of thing from Nick Nanos, who was on the air with us, Angus Reid, same sort of thing. So all the polling companies, advocates, showing the same thing. Basically, the Liberals flatlining 20 points behind the Conservatives. They gave it their best shot. It's like a 3-point jump shot at the buzzer from the center court. You hope it goes in nothing but net, but this one hit the rim and bounced on the side. Why is it falling flat? Many years ago in politics, you would have used the expression credibility gap. I saw a lovely new expression, which is the say/do gap. So there's a huge gap between what the Liberals have been saying for years now and what they actually do. So let's stick with climate change as an example. $14 billion say-do gap. In other words, they've shoved off money that was supposed to have been dedicated to that because they couldn't add it at the time that it was supposed to be spent now, because they would go beyond the $40 billion deficit. So what's the top line for the Canadian voting public? $40 billion in new deficit, stuff that you promised before that you're not getting done, $53 billion in new spending, and to help pay for that, $19 billion in new taxes. People are taking that away and saying, Mr. Trudeau, housing, that's their big point. And that's the one thing that most Canadians look at the budget and say, well, you're finally doing something on housing, or you're saying you're going to do something on housing. We're not against that. But what's happened in the past 8.5 years is what really counts, Todd. Mr. Trudeau only 8 months ago was in Hamilton saying, you know what, housing isn't really federal jurisdiction. I love the fancy word he used. The federal government doesn't have carriage of the housing file. It's not very high sounding. But what did it mean was, well, we haven't done anything because we didn't think it was our job. Oh, Poilievre's crushing us because we forgot to take care of housing. Oh, we promise now we'll start taking care of housing. Too little, too late. It's not working.
The classic dilemma, overpromise, underdeliver. You know that's very toxic when you do stuff like that. Even on the housing front, Tom, I mean, they're basically saying, look, we're going to build, close to 4 million homes in the next 7 years. I mean, that is, with all due respect, impossible.
Well, but they know that. But they have to put up big, it's like the 2 billion trees Mr. Trudeau was going to plant because that helped him get elected once before. So he comes up with these magnificent promises that people would love to believe. But after 8.5 years of stuff like that, they just don't believe it anymore. And it's not just me who's saying that, by the way, with regard to the tree planting. Jerry DeMarco, who has a very important role as Canada's Environment and Sustainable Development Commissioner, looked at those numbers and said a very tiny percentage of those trees are ever going to get planted. And it's the same thing with the housing. People just don't believe it anymore.
Okay, so what's the strategy? Let's say I was able to snap my fingers and I make you the top Liberal strategist now. We got about a year. What do we do?
I think that the only tool left in their toolbox is a leadership race. I note with great interest the rumors that came out from a very reliable source last week. Lawrence Martin is not a Cub reporter. He's one of the most respected voices, and nobody really tried to deny that meetings have been taking place to try to float the name of Dominic LeBlanc. Who else is out there? Well, I noticed that we had Mark Carney giving a wonderful speech on Earth Day. He's got tremendous credibility on all matters sustainable development and environment. And he was giving another important speech to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. He's out there. He's doing it through things like the 2020 group, which was a Liberal foundational group, but that's something that Trudeau used to completely own. Carney doesn't carry the weight of the Trudeau years on his shoulders. Chrystia Freeland is an outstanding administrator, but she's been held back and hampered by Trudeau, who's never understood the importance of having reasonable public finances. I mean, we've had these massive deficits even before the pandemic. So I think that Carney's going to have a bit of a lead coming out of the starting blocks. One of the things that will help Freeland, the Liberals of the 5 parties in Parliament, the only party never to have had a woman leader is the Liberal Party. So maybe that gives her a bit of an inside track with some of the Liberal voters.
And there are two camps to this, and I know you're of the opinion that Trudeau will leave. The other side would say, he's saying to himself, look, I'm a great campaigner. My back is to the wall. I do my best. And, I'll be darned if I walk away from a challenge from Pierre Poilievre as well. And also, hey, I don't mind, I kind of like being prime minister. Is that possible too? Is that scenario possible?
It's so possible that we saw it just a few years ago with a certain Stephen Harper. I'm not gonna let Justin Trudeau decide that he's actually going to have a chance of becoming prime minister of the country. Harper had won 3 successive elections. His last one having been majority in 2011 to 2015. He was convinced he was the only person who could keep the Conservative Party competitive, and he ran against Trudeau in 2015 and really got thumped. So it's the same sort of thing that Trudeau's convinced himself that how can they possibly do anything without me? Trudeau does deserve credit for bringing the Liberals back from nowhere. I mean, after the beating that they took with Ignatieff, Trudeau did an amazing job. He brought them back to, and I was one of the people he beat in that 2015 election. He brought them back from the brink of elimination altogether from the Canadian political scene, built them back up into the powerhouse that they've been. So he gets credit for that. But, Todd, as you know, I used to be a minister provincially in Quebec with the provincial Liberals, which means I still talk to and I'm friends with a whole bunch of Liberals at the senior level in the federal Liberal Party. And they're all trying to give Trudeau the same message. It's, consider this your legacy mandate. It's time to consolidate and move on and, take some well-deserved positions in the private sector. Mr. Trudeau, as you correctly say, is having none of it for now. He's trying to hold on till June, seeing what the numbers are. I loved the spin that the Liberal Flax put on it over the weekend in a Globe and Mail article, Todd. They said, we're hoping that maybe we'll have caught up by 5 points by like June, July, and be only 15 points behind the Conservatives. When that's your big goal, several months down the road after this budget that's supposed to save you to be only 15% behind the Conservatives, it says it all.
Hey, one last question. I wonder, desperation can often focus the mind. So,
yeah.
What about, if things don't improve, do you think they would take a second look at some of these unpopular things? For example, the carbon tax with the 7 premiers aligned against it, or this recent capital gains tax increase? Did they start to say, ooh, maybe we better pull back? Or is that too much? Does that look like
it's too much? He's already on the record so strongly as saying he won't do it again after that blunder that they made, carving out that difference for Atlantic Canada, especially with regard to home heating fuel. And by the way, that's one of the points that was the strongest and the best delivered, because he's very careful where he lands his punches, Mark Carney. But he talked specifically about that and saying, you have to understand why the price on carbon is there. It's to lower our greenhouse gas emissions for Canada to meet its international obligations to fight climate change. So he was pointing clearly to the decision, wrong-headed in the event, because it didn't help them at all, to roll back for one specific group. The minute they did that, provinces that heat with natural gas were saying, well, take it off our heating source as well. Of course, Trudeau wouldn't do that. And by the way, Stephen Guilbeault essentially, in his words, said that he would not stick around, i.e. he'd quit if Trudeau did that again. So Trudeau said he's not touching it anymore. So it's not even an option for him. There's been lots of free advice out there. I saw one wag, saying, well, he should, do bold things like, eliminate the management that we have, the market management that we have of poultry and milk. Well, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, that's not just bold, that's suicidal, because Trudeau has at least been able to hold out of that. And there will be farmers worried about quality on things like supply management. So I think that Trudeau knows that he's well into his 9th year. It hasn't gone well for the past couple of years. It's up to him. But I think he's dreaming in Technicolor if he believes that he's going to be able to pull this thing out of the fire.
Tom Mulcair, CTV News political commentator, former leader of the NDP. I often think, what would have happened, Tom, if you had won back in 2015 and been prime minister? You must think about that too sometimes.
Yeah, but then I wouldn't be talking to you, and that wouldn't be nearly as fun, Tom.
Thanks so much. We'll talk again, my friend.
All the best.